Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Managing Your Career Success. My name is DJ Macarleen Hobson, and I am representing the U.S. office of ACCA. Before I hand this over to our esteemed presenter, Maria Murkian, I'd like to remind everyone of a few housekeeping rules. Please keep yourself on mute. This is to help to eliminate any background noise during the presentation. Second, as the webinar is taking place and you have questions, please type those questions into the chat box that's located on the right-hand side of your screen. The questions will be answered at the end of the webinar if time permits. And finally, the recording of this webinar will be sent to all attendees after it is completed. So if you're unable to stay for the whole thing, no worries. It'll be in your inbox by tomorrow morning. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Maria.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Glad to see that we have such a large number of participants for our discussion. So the title of this particular webinar is Managing Your Career Success. And before we jump in, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I know you've all received my bio. Perhaps some of you have had the chance to participate in some of the other webinars that we've done in the past. My background is in leadership and management development and organizational development. So I focus primarily on providing training, coaching, and consulting to leaders at all levels within the organization. I work with a number of different industries, from government to private sector to nonprofits. And I've had a chance to work with everyone from aspiring leaders to senior executive and C-suite. My particular focus on leadership development and organizational development is on identity. And so I spend a lot of time focusing on issues of diversity and inclusion in the workplace, as well as intercultural communication and understanding. So a good deal of my work is focusing with global and domestic organizations to understand how we communicate differently based on our cultural backgrounds, our upbringings, and our personal identity differences. And I think that has given me some good insights into when it comes to an issue like managing our career success, depending on the organizational culture within which we find ourselves, depending on sometimes the regional or national cultures within which we're working. Those are different layers that can have an impact on the way that we perceive ourselves within the workplace, our goals, our expectations for career advancement, and who is sort of responsible for our career success. So we're going to take some time to dig into that afternoon. And why this topic? I'm assuming that everyone on this call is interested in being successful and wanting to find ongoing opportunities to advance in the workplace. And in order for us to have those opportunities in front of us, we need to explore how to be advocates for our own growth and development. You know, there are a lot of factors that play a role in this. And in today's world, you know, we've seen a lot of changes over the last few decades, economically, culturally, that have an impact on how we go about advocating for our career success. So today we're going to examine how those various shifts in organizational functions, employee life cycles, leader expectations can impact your career advancement, as well as some of the cultural factors that you might want to consider when you're looking at trying to advance your own career within the US culture. We're going to talk specifically about this idea of advocacy for our own career success and what we need to be able to you know, really be champions for our own professional development. Now, this is an hour-long session, and I want to definitely leave time for questions at the end. So this is not going to be a deep dive. This is an opportunity for us to get some tips and strategies for managing our own career success. But if you're interested in further resources, I'm happy to share that at the end of the session or after the session. Okay, so let's dig in. I want you to, if you would, think about some of the changes and advancements that have impacted the workplace over the last couple of decades, and specifically in the United States. How have these changes influenced how employees advance their careers? And feel free to add your thoughts in the chat pod. We want to make this an interactive session, so I'd love to hear from some folks. What are some of the changes, and how does that impact the way that people need to go about advancing their careers? You should see the chat pod on the right-hand side of your screen there, if you have any ideas. Thank you. So changing the pace, the change of pace at work, right? Things just seem to be moving much more quickly. And some of that is because of technological advancements. There's just a much more of an expectation for instant gratification, right? That we should get results quickly, that information should be distributed quickly, but also that things are going to change very quickly in terms of the workplace. New industries, absolutely. Constantly changing industries, which also changes the level of competition in a lot of these industries. Already available experts in the industry with tons of experience not retiring. That's a really good point, right? There are more people who are staying in the workplace longer because of medical advancements over the last few decades, and also because of social norm changes. It's much more acceptable and expected that people will stay in the workplace longer. Also because of economic changes. The economic downturn in 2008 in the US as well as overseas had a huge impact on people's willingness to retire at an earlier age. So we do see a lot more people staying in the workplace longer. Yes, Tolu, advancement in technology, more specialization. Yes, absolutely. People trying to find their niche, right? To be able to have those advancements in specialized areas. More in-house development. Yes, absolutely. Trying to build internal capacity as a way to ultimately save money, as well as more outsourcing opportunities. So kind of a little bit of both, right? There's a broader pool of available experts to draw from, because we do have a global pool in a lot of ways now, whereas before it might have been more regional or domestic. More automation and use of AI, yes, absolutely. It's definitely, when we think about the jobs and the tasks that are now assigned to computers, right, or assigned to non-humans versus what humans are expected to do, that those changes have had a huge impact on employees and what opportunities are available. Generational differences, yes, absolutely, regarding environment, regarding work balance and flexibility, when and how and from where people should be working has a huge impact. Really good point. So a lot of this, these technological, economic, and cultural changes have had an impact not only on the way that business is done, but also in terms of employees and their expectations for advancement. So something that we hear a lot from today's company leaders are this notion of the VUCA workplace, a VUCA organizational environment. We are constantly dealing with turbulence and change, as was mentioned in the chat pod. So VUCA stands for volatile. There's a lot more volatility, a lot more rapid change and disruption that's happening within our organizations, within our industries, which brings a level of uncertainty, right? We don't necessarily always have the stability that we did in the past in terms of our organizations. Complexity. organizations as well as employees are dealing with much more complex challenges, and employees that increasingly across the board are being asked to engage in more complex decision making than they had in the past. You know, the onus used to fall squarely on the people at the very top of the organization to make the tough decisions and pass that information down. And we are dealing with increasingly flatter organizational structures and more of an expectation for employees to be empowered to make decisions, to speak their minds, and to take matters into their own hands, kind of. And then ambiguity, right? All of this turbulence and change also makes things a little bit more ambiguous. And as some people mentioned, that ambiguity can also come from cultural changes and in thinking about the fact that there's not necessarily always one clearly defined path for individual success anymore. There are a lot of different divergent paths that people are taking to achieve the results that they want. So it makes it a little bit more difficult for us to find and ask for that one clear path and those clear steps to help us with our career advancement. We're really in an era of do-it-yourself career development. There's much less focus on formal training and career growth on the part of organizations because they're dealing with more frequent employee turnover. One of the cultural changes that we've seen definitely in the United States, as well as in corporations around the globe, is more mobility. Employees no longer feeling a sense of career-long loyalty to one organization, that there's more of an expectation that we're going to bounce around, we're going to move from one job to the next, sometimes even moving from one career path to another. So organizations have had to adapt to that higher mobility, higher level of volatility, and that has shifted their focus on formal training and opportunities internally for employees. Also thinking about the U.S. work culture. In the United States is, as are many Western countries, a more individualistic society. There's much more of a focus on the individual versus the collective, which means that there is more of an expectation that employees will advocate for themselves, will take initiative, will ask or even sometimes demand what they need and want in their career growth, rather than sitting back and waiting for somebody to notice the good work that you all are doing. Definitely speaks for itself, but there are instances where we can't expect that somebody's going to sort of just jump in and look out for us, right? In today's workforce, there's much more of a need for employees to sort of be advocates for their own development, which means identifying your strengths and weaknesses, determining and kind of going after those development opportunities that you want, rather than waiting to be recognized and rewarded by the organization's leadership. It's not that the organizational leaders don't care about growing and developing their employees. It's just that the expectation for who's going to drive that is a little bit different today than it's been in the past. So let's talk about steps for managing your career effectively. Specifically, there are going to be 4 steps that we're going to focus on. Hopefully you can see this. Identify goals. We'll talk a little bit about what that means in a few moments. Advocate for yourself. Specifically, how do you do that? Seeking strong mentors and sponsors, both within your organization as well as outside. And we'll talk a little bit about some tips for that. And then finally, soliciting and acting on feedback from others, so that we're constantly in a cycle of growth and development for ourselves. So let's focus first on this idea of clarifying your goals. First and foremost, we need to have a clearly defined vision for what we want, right? Every individual who's looking for their next step in their career, because there are no clearly defined career paths, or at least not as clearly defined as they used to be, it's kind of up to you to determine what's most important for you. And also, I think, in the perspective of our professional and our personal lives, the notion of a very bright, stark line between work versus life is swiftly becoming a thing of the past. As was mentioned earlier, technological advancements have really changed the expectations for when people are at work versus when they're not. And this can be challenging sometimes because it often means that people feel like they have to work harder, they can never shut off or unplug from their work. But what I want to focus on in terms of clarifying both our personal and professional goals and sort of where those combine is when you think about what gives you a sense of meaning and purpose in your life, and when you find professional opportunities that give you a sense of meaning and purpose, that feel aligned with the life path that you want to be on, you consider how many hours a day and a week you spend working. A lot of us spend more time, with our colleagues, spend more time in our work mode than we do in our personal mode. And so we want to make sure that it feels fulfilling. Ultimately, that's going to help you to stay motivated. It's going to give you a deeper sense of fulfillment in your life. So starting with that notion of, what do I care most about? What are my needs, both professionally and personally, and what does that mean in terms of my career path? So I love this quote by William James: "The greatest evolution of our generation is the discovery that human beings, by changing the inner attitudes of their minds, can change the outer aspects of their lives." So going along these lines, planning and advocating for our career success really starts from within. And I think this quote illustrates the importance of focusing first on yourself, your inner perspectives, beliefs, and goals in order to drive your external success. What job you get, what promotions you get, what achievements you can celebrate. It really has to start from having an internal compass and knowing what's most important to you and what's going to define success for you. Each and every person on this call probably has a slightly different definition of what personal success will look like for you, depending on your own needs and desires. So how do you know what your career goals are, what what's going to give you a sense of fulfillment? Some things to think about, right? When you take a step back and do some internal reflection, what is it that you actually want, right? A lot of people find themselves in a certain career trajectory and feel obligated to stay on that path, even if it's not fulfilling to them. But it's important to do what feels right to you, not what you've been told is the next step in the path. Again, when we look at the workplace of today, when we look at organizations today, there's not always one clear line of progression. And so sometimes you do have to follow your instincts and follow what feels right for you. So some things to consider when you're trying to put together your career plan. What are your core values or guiding principles in life? What do you care most about? What are your beliefs? What are your dreams? What are your aspirations in your life? What gives you a sense of fulfillment? What are the skills, talents, and achievements that you're most proud of? What can you celebrate about what you already bring to the table, what you're good at, what you're most interested in, what you're motivated by, as well as what are your expectations for your career? Where do you want to end up eventually? When you do hit that point where you say, I think I'm done, I'm ready to retire, what do you want to be able to look back on and celebrate? Also, knowing what you don't want is very important when it comes to defining your career path. These are all the things that you do want in life, but it's also important to know, what are my disinterests? What do I really not like doing? What bores me? What does not give me a sense of purpose? What does not align with my goals? Sometimes by getting clear on what we don't want, that can help us to eliminate some of the things that just don't feel right to us. And it helps us to stay on the right path versus diverging. So I love this quote by the ancient philosopher Seneca: "If one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable." And I love that quote because if we think about it, all of us can find ourselves as those little sailboats out on this vast ocean, not really having an end destination. So we're just kind of floating out there. right? You need to have a destination. You need to have a sense of where you want to ultimately land in order to figure out the right path forward. So let's talk about this second piece of managing your own career success. Now that I've identified what the end goal is, what I care most about, what I want to achieve in my career and in my life, now comes the opportunity to consider all of the possibilities that are available to me. And I love this visual because, again, there are many doors that we can go through, and it's really up to us to determine which is the door that feels right to me, which is the door that's going to get me to that end result. There may be more than one door that will help you to achieve the career goals that you've set for yourself. So that's when you have to consider and weigh the possibilities and identify what's the right path. Okay, so how do you know what door to go through, right? What are some questions that you might want to ask yourself when you are considering all of the possibilities for your career growth? Feel free to answer in the chat. What are some questions that you might want to ask yourself when you're trying to determine what the next step in your career path should be? And go ahead and enter your thoughts in the chat pod. Yes, cost is often something that we have to think about, right? How much is this going to set me back? What's the potential, price tag for the, professional development opportunities I'm looking for? Syed, thank you. What interests me? That's a really important question, especially if we are going to make an investment. How important is work-life balance? Absolutely. And what's that going to mean in terms of what I say yes to and what I say no to? Yeah, how long is it going to take me to achieve that particular goal? Is this something that I can do in the short term, or is this going to take several years? And what's the effort that's going to be involved? Great, thank you, Urvi. Great, Olukemi, what are my abilities and strengths? How do I want to live in retirement? Yes, absolutely. So many people don't take the time to think about that, right? What am I going to need when I do hit the end of my career? And then also, yeah, Kuram, thinking about the risks. What are the potential risks if I do decide to make a career change? Your own knowledge and capabilities, what are you good at? Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of those questions that we were just looking at are important for us to identify when we think about the possibilities and sort of select which door you want to go through. And managing expectations and looking at the reality, what you can do, what really is possible. Oh, I love it, Dominic. Preparing for jobs that don't exist now. That can be a tough one, but I think you raise a really good point. There are times where we have to be a little bit more open to what we don't even know yet, right? So looking outside of the typical historical, traditional career paths and looking forward at what doesn't even exist now but is going to be needed. And we'll talk about that in a few moments, but Dominic, you raise a really good point there that we'll come back to. So some questions that you might want to ask, especially if you're thinking about advancement within your own organization, as well as others. What does success look like in your organization? How does leadership define success? And how does that compare to your definition of success? Also looking at who is advancing and what are some of the behaviors or the skills that they possess or demonstrate that set them apart. Being able to do a little bit of comparison and contrasting, can help us get a sense of, again, not just looking at one person, but looking across the board at patterns. What are the skills, the sets of behaviors that we can witness across the board that are present with those who are advancing more quickly? What skills or talents do I possess that can be better leveraged? Sometimes you have talents and skills that maybe you just haven't had an opportunity to demonstrate as much within your organizational workplace, within your workplace, and there might be some opportunities to show people what you got. What skills do you need, and what resources do you need? And I think that goes back to some of the comments in the chat pod around cost and time and risk, trying to think about, what's the cost benefit analysis of developing new skills. So how do we investigate some opportunities for growth? If you think about different ways in which you can advance your career, oftentimes we think about that first and foremost in terms of promotions, right? I want to get to the next rung on the ladder. And absolutely, promotions can be an important stepping stone for us in our career growth. But there are also other ways. Rotational assignments or stretch assignments can sometimes give you an opportunity to be exposed to a new group of people, can be exposed to new skill sets and be able to develop those skill sets through on-the-job training, which can sometimes be more cost-effective than formal training processes. So that's something to consider if there are opportunities for some sort of rotational assignments. Also, it can sometimes help us to break outside of our complacency and doing the same old if you're really looking for a new challenge. Lateral career moves can sometimes be really helpful. When I look for an opportunity that maybe is not a promotion, but again, it's going to give me a chance to develop a new set of skills, to come into contact with a new network of people, and be exposed to a different way of, a different vantage point, a different way of looking at the work. And shadowing assignment, opportunities to shadow people who have the jobs or have the skill sets that you are seeking, being able to kind of follow in their footsteps for a period of time and be exposed to that. Shadowing can be really helpful, not only because it can give us a look into some of the skills and the experiences that we may want to consider, but it can also tell us sometimes what we don't want. There are instances where people will take on shadowing assignments and realize, because of that experience, oh, I thought that this was the career path I wanted, but now that I've seen it in action, this really is not as interesting to me as I thought it was going to be. So all of these opportunities, both formal and informal, can give you exposure, can give you opportunities to learn and develop new knowledge and skills, and can also help you to sort of get a little bit more clarity on what that next step in your career growth might look like. So I'm curious to hear from folks. What are some of the opportunities for growth that you see within your organizations? It might fall within one of these four elements. It might be something different, but what does that look like for you? What sort of opportunities are out there? Promotions. Yep, common one, right? We tend to look for what's that next opportunity, what's that next step up. Shadowing opportunities are available, great. Rotation and shadowing. Thanks, Dominic. The business focusing on new markets. So also beyond these four elements, being able to be a part of those conversations where you're looking into new markets to break into and identifying the particular skills that might be needed coming down the road can be really helpful. So, again, it requires sometimes a little bit of creative thinking to look for opportunities and ask for opportunities that are beyond promotions or job postings, but maybe give you a chance to, to expose yourself to some new ways of doing things. So do your research, right? What skills do you need to be eligible for another assignment or position? And who's held that assignment in the past? What wisdom might they be able to share with you? So, looking for those folks who have done what you're thinking of doing and reaching out to them. who's a part of that team? What can you learn about that team's needs and expectations? What challenges might someone in that position face? And if you were in that position, how would you address those challenges? So, these questions can help you. A lot of times we see these questions show up when you're preparing for your job interview, but I think they can also help you to answer those questions for yourself. So think about, is this the assignment, the position, the opportunity that's really going to be a best fit for me? So taking some time to kind of dig in and do some data gathering can be really effective. A little bit about advocating for yourself. And I love this visual, right? With children, typically a lot of kids, are pretty open about their. Oh, someone's saying there's a lot of background noise. Are other people getting background noise? Yes. Okay. Oh, lots of people getting background noise. Okay.
We apologize about that. We are looking into that right now.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm not hearing it on my end. So hopefully you can all hear me. Okay, I'm going to continue and hopefully you can all hear me okay. I will try not to move just in case it is. Okay, great. Thank you. You can hear me. So when we think about children tend to be very open and unafraid and unabashed when it comes to showcasing their talents, right? Even if they don't have it perfect, perfection is not something that children often care as much about. But the older we get, the more that our egos can sometimes get in the way, and the less likely we are to feel like we are willing to take risks. So I like this image because I think sometimes in order for us to be advocates for ourselves, we do have to tap back into that childlike quality of being able to sort of just throw ourselves out there and say, hey, look at me. There's a great quote by Maya Angelou. I learned a long time ago, the wisest thing I can do is to be on my own side, be an advocate for myself and others like me. So we want to focus on how we can become advocates for our own career development. And also when we think about how we can support those who are coming up behind us, we know what it's like to be questioning and wondering how we can move forward in our career. And it's especially valuable for us to be able to share our wisdom with others as we gain it. So there's something that I wanted to talk quickly about, this idea of imposter syndrome, going back to that notion that as adults, sometimes we lose our sense of openness and we tend to kind of have a lot more reservation when it comes to showcasing ourselves or advocating for ourselves. Imposter syndrome is a reaction that many of us have to certain situations where we find ourselves feeling insecure, anxious, or afraid sometimes. And people who experience imposter syndrome often feel like they're a fraud, right? I don't belong here. I'm going to be found out for not knowing or for not being the right fit for this particular position or career. And even people who have a great deal of experience and expertise can suffer from imposter syndrome. Anytime that we undervalue our accomplishments and skills, when we hold back from stepping into the limelight and accepting accolades or positive feedback or appreciation, that might be an instance where we're suffering from a little bit of imposter syndrome. It can show up when people are overworking themselves because they are afraid that they're not going to be perceived as competent. An overwhelming desire for perfectionism that can sometimes get in the way of us actually completing our projects. Undermining one's own achievements or discounting praise. So sometimes we hear people say things like, oh, I just got lucky with that, versus, no, I had the skills and I worked really hard, right? Or, oh, I'm never going to get this right. It's sort of self-fulfilling prophecy or putting themselves down. or in the face of praise saying, oh, that wasn't a big deal. I should have done it better. I should have done it differently. So imposter syndrome sometimes can show up for us, and it can really paralyze people from becoming advocates for their own growth and development if they feel like they don't deserve to be there, if they feel like they're never going to be successful. Okay, so be thoughtful of, have there been times where perhaps you've fallen into that trap of discounting your own value, or brushing aside your own achievements, or getting so focused on trying to be perfect that you miss opportunities to really accept praise in an effective way. Rather than hiding ourselves, advocacy is really about stepping out into the limelight and showing people who we are and what we're capable of. So what are some ways that you can advocate for yourself? One is showcase your expertise, right? You all bring an immense amount of expertise. As was mentioned earlier, specialization is really critical these days when it comes to being able to stand out. So think about what makes you really good at what you do. What are your interests? What are your talents? What makes you unique within your organizational environment? Another way to advocate for yourself is to volunteer to gain C-suite visibility. How can you get out in front of the senior leadership and show them who you are? They might not know you, and they should. This could be attending corporate events. It could be volunteering to do on-campus recruiting at universities to try to get new folks to come on board. It could be volunteering to present on new projects or processes that are going to benefit the company. So especially if your boss supports your growth and development, you might want to ask your supervisor for a chance to speak publicly at a meeting or event where you know senior leaders will be present. The more that you can have visibility into the people at the top, the more it opens up your network and your possibilities. Don't be afraid to request professional development opportunities. I think oftentimes, again, because of that imposter syndrome, we close ourselves off. Oh, there's no resources. Oh, I don't want to be the person asking. Oh, someone else probably deserves this or needs this training more than me. Make your case for why engaging in these professional development opportunities will benefit the company. And don't be shy about asking for what you need. And then finally, I think this goes back to something that I think Dominic mentioned earlier. Do some research and keep your eyes open for gaps that you can fill, right? How can you become an expert in something that the company needs right now, or that you can see the company is going to need further down the road? So this could be related to changes or disruptions, technical advances, or new procedures and practices, new policies that are being set. It could also be critical organizational skills like project management, systems thinking, change management. So sometimes it's becoming an expert in some technical area that your organization needs. Sometimes it's becoming an expert in more on the management and organizational side. So think about where there are some gaps that you might be able to fill, and what sort of professional development opportunities might you need to ask for again in order to become that expert. Okay, so let's talk about how you go about getting a mentor or sponsor. So I'm just curious for the folks out there, please put into the chat, what do you look for, or what do you think are the important qualities that you should look for in a mentor or sponsor? Trust. Yeah, that's a big one, right? We need to have a trusting relationship. And trust goes both ways. It's both being able to trust our mentor to look out for our needs, as well as being trustworthy, knowledgeable. Yeah, we want somebody who brings some expertise and some knowledge that can help us to advance our careers. Knowledge, expertise, support. Yeah, somebody who cares for your success. And sometimes that support and that care means that it's got to be somebody who has the time to devote to you. We might have people who care about your success, but maybe for some other reason, they're just not able to devote the time. And so that's something to consider, right? Someone respected by senior management. Yeah, absolutely. It's always good to have somebody who others see as a, respectable, trustworthy, competent leader. Someone who's got connections. Yes, absolutely. We'll talk about that in a few moments. Somebody with their own success stories and relevant experience and integrity. Wonderful. Yes, we're looking for somebody who can really help us to take that next step, which means we have to look for someone who's got a pretty solid reputation, who we can trust, who we believe is competent and has the relevant knowledge and expertise. So a couple of things to think about in a mentor as well as a sponsor. Mentors and sponsors, this could be the same person for you, but the mentor responsibilities and the responsibilities of the sponsor differ a little bit. A person who's serving as a mentor for you gives you advice and guidance. Here's what you need in order to be successful in your career. Here's the things that you should be thinking about to set yourself up for success. They provide insights, they give you feedback, they help you recognize your strengths as well as your areas for growth. So they're really sort of that trusted guide and advisor. A sponsor is somebody who is a connector for you. They advocate for you with senior management, with other contacts. They tap you into their expansive network of people who can help you get to where you want to get, right? They might also recommend you for job assignments. So you think about the mentor is sort of the internal facing, right? The mentor is facing you and helping you to develop yourself internally. The sponsor is your external facing support, right? They're going out there and leveraging their relationships and getting out there and sort of helping to advocate for you. So again, the same person could fill both of these roles, or you might have two different or more than two different people who are helping you in this way. Oh, Tolu, great question. Must the mentor be in your organization? Not necessarily. Many people find that it can be useful to have a mentor outside of their organization, perhaps somebody who still is within the industry so that they bring that expertise and that experience, but it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody inside your organization. In fact, sometimes it can be helpful for them to have a more outside neutral perspective and not know the organizational culture or dynamics that might be impacting you internally, because it can help them to provide you with some sound advice. So what should a mentor or sponsor do for you, right? What is it that you want in your mentor or sponsor? You want them to be somebody you admire and trust, as was mentioned in the chat. Somebody who represents your ideals and values. So again, someone you really respect and kind of feel a sense of connection to. You want them to be a good connector and communicator, right? So they have those strong networking skills. They can really be an advocate for you. You want them to be able to provide helpful and honest feedback to you. And we'll talk a little bit more about feedback in a moment. And you want them to be somebody that you can relate to. If you're going to be spending time developing a relationship with this person and getting that feedback, it's got to be somebody that you really can open up to. And they have to be willing to give their time and energy to you. So someone who's got the space and the capacity to really be there for you and help you out in your career growth. So something else to think about, what your mentor or sponsor needs from you. So when we've done research and asked mentors and sponsors, what is it that you wish your mentees knew? These are the things that they have said. They want their mentees to clarify your needs. What is it that you really want and need? So going back to that first stage that we talked about, when you clarify your goals, when you're really clear on the end result that you are trying to achieve, and you can communicate that to your mentor and sponsor, it gives them the information that they need to really go out there and help you. You need to be ready to state your case for why they should help you. What is it that makes you worthy of their time and attention? So really taking the time to kind of think about your case for, why they should be willing and able to dedicate their time to you. You want to be fully involved and open to learn. The best mentor-mentee relationships are the ones where both sides are willing to have honest conversations and receive feedback. So as a mentee, You have to kind of really be willing to listen to what this person has to offer. Value your mentor's time. They're probably busy. They've got a lot going on. So be prepared, be thoughtful, be articulate, and make sure that you're valuing their time constraints. And then also give feedback to your mentor to get what you need. So they can't read minds. And it's important for them to know how they're doing. So when you give them feedback and say, this is helpful, or this is what I need more of, that helps them to continue to tailor their relationship with you. So finally, soliciting feedback, not only from mentors and sponsors, but more broadly from a variety of sources. For your own career growth and development, it's really important for you to reach out and get insights from others that will help you to identify your strengths as well as your areas for growth. So when it comes to seeking actionable feedback, a lot of times what we hear is that people get frustrated because they say, I ask for feedback, but the feedback I get is sometimes fairly ambiguous, or I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to do with that feedback. How am I supposed to change? What am I supposed to learn? So sometimes you have to coach the people who are giving you feedback to get what you need. So be proactive. Go out there and ask people. And sometimes just saying, can I have some feedback is not going to get you very far, right? So asking some specific questions that help you get clarity on the behaviors that people want to see from you is really important. Also ask for specific recommendations or suggestions. Can you tell me what you think I need to do differently? Can you give me some suggestions for what further skills I need to develop, right? So try to get as specific as possible from the people who are giving you the feedback. And also listen for underlying messages. People might not tell you something straight on, but you can kind of tell from their nonverbal messages that they're really trying to give you a better understanding of what they're looking for from you. So again, asking for clarity when you're picking up on some of those underlying messages is really important. And then accepting that feedback. When you do get feedback where people are trying to redirect you and ask you to do something differently, many of us have emotional reactions to accepting feedback. I'll be the first to admit that even though I ask for feedback early and often from colleagues and from supervisors, the minute somebody says, I'd like to give you some feedback, I find myself getting a little bit tense, right? It's natural for us to sort of become a little reactive, and so we have to just notice that and manage it. Listening with curiosity and an intent to understand the feedback. So really trying to get at what is this person trying to convey to me? What can I appreciate about the message that they're giving me? And then again, ask for clarity, right? Especially when it comes to specific action that you can take. And say thank you to the person giving you the feedback, even if it was not asked for, even if it was not pleasant to hear. It's important to say thank you for being honest with me and giving me that feedback. Most of the time people are giving feedback because they want you to get better. They want to give you those suggestions. They want you to succeed. Decide how to best act on the feedback you've received, and then ask for more. Don't be shy to continue that cycle and ask for ongoing constructive feedback. Okay. Final quote, and then I'm going to open things up for questions. If you don't go after what you want, you'll never have it. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. If you don't step forward, you're always in the same place. I think that's a good quote for us to sort of end on because, again, as advocates for your own career growth, you know better than anyone else what's important to you, what you want to gain, what you're really good at. And so leverage that to show that to others and to ask for the support and the advice and the help that you need to get to that next level. So thank you so much. I want to open it up to the chat for any questions or comments that people have. And we'll try to answer as many as we can in the next few minutes. Are the slides? Yes, we will make the slides available to you. and I can also share some links to resources on seeking mentors and sponsors. Hopefully that would be helpful as well for you. Oh, how to maintain a long-term relationship with your mentor. Great question. You know, I think, again, it comes down to some of those basic suggestions for building a relationship with your mentor. You want to value their time. There's always something more that we can learn, right? So there may be instances where perhaps you have more frequent discussions with your mentor, especially during times of change or when you're really trying to look for that next step in your career. And then maybe you kind of hit a point where you're plateaued, where you say, I'm good right now. That doesn't mean that your relationship with your mentor should end. Maybe it means that it quiets down, but maintain that connection. Maybe just put a little note in your calendar to send an email to your mentor every couple of months. Send a personal thank you card to them every once in a while and say, you're somebody I really appreciate in my life. You've helped me out. I really rely on your advice, and I just want you to know that I appreciate you. So stay in contact with that mentor, even during the times where you don't need as much support, because mentors want, it feels good for them to be able to give back, and so you don't want to just be reaching out when you need help or when you need them to you know, open up their network for you. Great question. Great question, Julian. How do you handle in a positive way a gap between how you see yourself and how others see you? Oh, okay. Wow. Well, I'll give you a short answer to a long question. Really, I think a really insightful one. It's always easier for us to see other people's flaws than our own, right? There are instances where we all have our blind spots. And so, and there are instances where other people might have their own perceptions of us based on limited data. So I think it's important to accept all of that information. Again, sort of, for me, I try to separate the emotional element, the feelings that I have around that information from the data itself. And so being able to look at, if I'm hearing this from a number of different sources, not just one, then that's definitely something that I want to investigate and understand more of. If it's one person who's giving me that, that feedback based on one experience, then that could be an outlier, right? So I think you have to take all of that into consideration when you look at the feedback that you're getting. But if you are, if you hear that message from a number of different sources, then it's definitely something that you want to look into and see if there are some specific things that you need to change. I think we have time for one or two more questions if anybody has them. Some really great questions that you all are asking. I'm happy to stay on the line for a couple of more minutes if anyone does have questions. I also want to thank you all for your participation and for listening, and I wish you all the very best of luck. And please don't hesitate if you do have questions to reach out. Thank you all so much, everybody.
Thank you, Maria, for spending time with us today and doing a fantastic presentation. You're getting amazing feedback. And to everyone who attended, I want to echo Maria and say thank you. And we will be sending out the recording of the presentation once it has closed down, and we'll work with Maria to get a copy of the slide deck. So, and if you do think of any questions, the best ones always come on the ride home. You can email us at acca.usa@accaglobal.com. Again, acca.usa@accaglobal.com. And you can send your questions there, and we'll direct them to the correct person. So we'll hang out for a few more minutes and to see if anyone has any more questions. Okay, so we are going to call it a day. Again, thank you everybody for attending, and we hope to hear from you in the ACCA inbox with any feedback or any questions. All right, thank you again, Maria, and everyone have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.